Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin.
Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, serial entrepreneur with 30 ventures under my belt, where I failed at 20 of those and scaled 10 of those to success and turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This book just went live here in July of 2025. Key ingredient I talk about is how to use failure as a superpower and how custom software has really been the difference maker in every win that I have done. I'm now the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We are a nearshore software development company helping others build high-impact software without the corporate BS. Today, we are joined by Jim Olsen. Jim is a seasoned principal level developer, software architect, and hands-on CTO who's got some good stories. So everyone buckle up. Let's have some fun. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Look forward to it, and thank you for having me on.
You bet. Jim, please walk our listeners through the journey of your career.
Okay, yeah. Well, kind of started out unique. I taught myself at 9 to program. My dad worked for Bell Laboratories, and I had access to thermal terminals. So, you leave the paper out in the sun, it turns black. So I started out way back then and got my first job when I was 13. And then did follow through and go to college. Out of college, started with a startup in the Open Software Foundation that we were working with there. So I kind of got my roots in open source software, which was important to my career and understanding back early before it was really popular. Then because of that, I was brought on into Novell, where I rose to a distinguished engineer, which was a board-elected position on that, where I was working on a lot of the standard protocols you deal with today, things like LDAP, Internet Printing Protocol. I mean, all basic stuff now, but back then didn't exist, so we had to build it on that. And through that, I got involved with Netscape. Basically, we did a joint venture between Novell and Netscape. I personally moved all of their software from their platform to Novell's platform, and it resulted in my first kind of entrepreneurial effort, which was a spinoff called Novonix, which was a combination joint venture between the two where they invested in it, but we were an independent startup. So that was as the chief architect of that as my first startup, and got my feet wet there and learned a lot about how things you can be successful but still go wrong. We actually got our first product out the door, but then both decided it was too important and immediately shut us down and took all of our software we made. So I learned you can do everything right and still from the technical side, but there's a lot more to running a company than just the tech side. So it was a good first experience there. But then I actually ended up reporting directly to the CEO of Novell, who was Eric Schmidt at the time. So I got a lot of advice early on from him, from his experience at Sun, et cetera, on that kind of things. And then did some varying startups, as like you said, most startups do fail. So most of those failed on that. But then I also purposely worked in some big mortgage company to learn about the financial space and what that software development is like, because it's entirely different than a Silicon Valley style company, and learning what really goes on with the enterprise. I moved into Qualtrics for a while and worked with them. If you're familiar with them, they were a unicorn startup. Originally got acquired. I left before then to get into big data, where I was doing consulting and leading the consulting organization around big data efforts in very large companies. So I was working with the likes of Western Digital and HGST and everything across manufacturers to banks to et cetera. So again, I got exposed to a lot of what was going on. And one of the things I saw is, the whole reason for having big data was the fact that, you needed to do something with it. You don't just collect data. There's not much value in just landing data. So I was seeing data science efforts coming on fairly early on, and that's what kind of led to this current company, in that there was a lack of actually governance of all of that machine learning software at the time. And of course, that's led on to generative AI and now agentic AI and everything, not having a process in place. Most places were like my early days in the 80s and 90s coding, where on my desk, ship it to production, or push it right out there. That's what we were seeing with machine learning, where literally one person was the only person who could push a model that was literally being used by hundreds of machines, and nobody else knew how to actually replicate it, roll it back, or that person gets hit by a bus, God forbid, they were in trouble. And I saw this again and again, and that kind of spurred the idea of not only going down the CI/CD route, where you have a process for how you get it out there, but also gaining knowledge about what you're putting it out there, because machine learning, generative AI are non-deterministic in nature. So you do need to have more understanding of a good process to build trust. And that's kind of what led to my current role. I was actually brought as VP of engineering to build the process, but I kind of redesigned what they had as a start and was moved into CTO role instead on that. And we brought a full-time VP to more manage the people.
Well, so, wow, Jim, you have done a lot in the development space, both startups, both large companies, big and small. And you live half the year in Park City, Utah, and half the year where you are now at a cabin in 10,000 square feet in Colorado, right?
No, the cabin's only 600 square feet, but I'm 10,000
No,
feet
or
high.
10,000, I'm sorry, 10,000 feet elevation.
Yeah.
My
So
bad.
no worries, but yeah, no, it's
So
great
is
environment.
that your way of escaping and being able to just focus without the distractions?
Well, it's a little bit of that. I mean, as CTO, you work long hours. If you're able to basically at the end of the day walk out, go walk in the woods and relax and decompress, it gives you time to kind of think about things differently and step back from the problems for a minute. So it provides that peace and isolation. And I love nature, that you can actually do that kind of things or go for a ride on the UTV or whatever. But it provides ready access to kind of an instant 2-hour vacation, and then you get back to it.
And thanks to Elon Musk and Starlink, you can get good connectivity really being off the grid.
Yep, so far it's working pretty good. I did one of the first actual DC conversions of his unit because I run on pure DC. So we kind of hacked it and figured out the wiring to actually be able to run it off of DC.
Very nice. Now, so Model Up, tell us about your company and what you guys are doing.
Sure, absolutely. One of the big problems with the rapid rise in machine learning, AI, generative AI, now agentic AI, is understanding basically what is deployed where, what went into it, ensuring it's behaving as it's supposed to, understanding the ROI of what, like, okay, I'm using generative AI, it's costing me how much in tokens and how much am I getting back in business on it, who approved it, and because they're the very nature, you hear about the hallucinations and you hear about the bad effects of, like, McDonald's, they deployed that AI solution in their kiosk and they got all these TikTok videos of people, oh, I'd like one fry. Okay, I added 10 fries to your things. No, 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 I only wanted one. Okay, I added another 10 fries. You don't want that happening to your business. It makes you look bad. It can hurt your brand, or as well as cost you real money. So how do you actually build trust in AI applications to understand that not only are they behaving properly once deployed, but how did they get there? And the foundation of that, our first clients were things like banks, et cetera, who are under Frank Dodd Act, where they have to prove this stuff or they get fined. They get audited. They have to show they've done the due diligence to make sure it's making fair financial decisions for people, because you can destroy people's lives with this. Well, now we're seeing where generative AI and other solutions are coming into things like healthcare, where it literally is making life or death decisions about
Yes.
people and stuff. And do you want to just trust the solution and not be able to defend that's behaving correctly, or more importantly, hurt your brand, hurt your company, and hurt real lives? So you need a process for actually getting that out in place, understanding, building trust, understanding how it's performing, and tying it back to a use case, not just a technology. So our software actually manages that process end to end, from use case being we don't even build anything yet, all the way out to monitoring and retirement and replacement, et cetera, as well. And we're really unique that way, in that we're not a data science workbench. We work with all of them. And instead, what we do is we actually manage that overall governance process in an agnostic way.
Gotcha. So, AI is obviously the hot topic over the past 2 years, that at this point, things are changing on a weekly basis and evolving. And I mean, you said it best, but for most companies to take true advantage of AI, you have to have good data. And then not only do you have to have good data and centralized data from everything, but then you need governance on that data or it's no good. And that's, you know, I think, the next 5 years, most large corporations, that's probably one of their number one goals, to ensure they can maximize AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's some of our biggest customers are things like Fidelity, Procter and Gamble, et cetera. I mean, they're big companies that we work with. We're unusual as a startup that way. It's like they obviously have the largest need because you can't make wrong moves in those environments, or there's real fines. I forget which bank it was, but they were fined like billions of dollars for making a mistake on that kind of things for having a bad AI model. You can't do this stuff. It's not okay. Never mind, even if you're not a fine, okay, well, now I hurt my brand reputation. Many companies, brand is their most important thing. Like, you're buying one brand of toilet paper versus another beyond quality issues. Brand makes an influence there. So you absolutely want to make sure these things are performing correctly and it's understood, and you also understand if it's worth the investment.
OpenAI recently announced their new consulting service that their minimum consulting client is a $10 million engagement, and they're literally putting AI integration engineers to truly help people take it past and get it to the next level. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, again, it depends on what you need as a company, because there's one thing about like running your own LLM or customized LLMs. I personally have a viewpoint. I think we're going to shift a little bit, where instead of rather than having everybody do large language models, which are basically generalists, for lack of a better term, they know a little bit about everything and they sound very convincing they know it all. And they don't necessarily do. With the recent advances in model distillation techniques, where basically they actually can use one of those generalist models augmented with very specific information to the task at hand, and then instilling that knowledge into a small language model that you can actually run locally yourself. That sets up the perfect kind of agentic architecture, where now I have expert agents, just like you don't have one worker who knows it all. I mean, too many people think CTOs are, everything. No, you can't. It's not possible. Instead, you are that generalist who can then find the experts and work with the experts who can dive to that next level deeper. And then, when we actually look at that, I think that's where SLMs will start to come in, where you have these teams of agents, basically, not that different than humans, who have specialized knowledge, work together, and then are supervised. There's a swarm method and a supervised method, but are supervised to actually then do this in a lot more cost-effective manner, because now I can run these SLMs locally. Obviously, OpenAI doesn't want that direction, but it's
Right.
like that's where I see some very interesting things going forward.
Very interesting. So, Jim, you mentioned CTOs can't know everything. It's probably one of the hardest jobs out there over the past couple of years. It's been very volatile. CTOs are blamed for everything. They not only have to lead the engineering teams, the technical side, but also need to justify their existence to non-technical executives and financial professionals who can't even spell AI or don't really know what it means. And you've had such a distinguished career. How did you get your current role at Model Ops?
Well, so when I came in is initially entered the company. They were more of a consulting organization, but kind of had the area of focus that I was interested in around model governance, but didn't really yet have a tangible instantiation of that. There was some proof of concept code and some items that they used in their consulting business as accelerators, but to put it bluntly, they weren't enterprise grade. So I was brought in initially to build a team and redesign the product and get a first version out. So I'm a very, very rapid prototyper. And so basically, I was able to put together a whole platform that demonstrated the art of the possible and get it put in place. But then obviously it became clear to my superiors that it was better I was doing more of that side, doing the architecture, doing the actual development, guiding engineers, and staying on top of the industry than spending my time doing reviews and tracking Jira tickets and things like that. So we kind of decided to split the roles, and they moved me into the CTO position to take that over. And then we brought in a VP of engineering who was more targeted with the actual mechanics of running the people side and the ticket side and things like that. And I concentrate around the architecture, education of the engineers, and all the different aspects of
Uh,
that, but just
Back
more
up.
technical.
back up. How did you get in the door at the company? Was it a LinkedIn job ad, a recruiter? Did you know somebody?
It was kind of, we'd worked with them in the past, basically. So it's through networking, basically. And they became aware that they wanted to jump to this next level. I was in a small company that got acquired by a big company. Things were tumultuous in the large company. So it was an opportune time that I was looking for another opportunity. So they approached me around coming in as the VP role, along with one of my other former colleagues who came as VP of product. So it's kind of a ready built team.
Okay.
So they brought us in together to basically kind of turn it into a product company rather than a consulting company.
Gotcha. All right. Well, tell us about some of the current projects you're working on.
Well, the most recent work we've been doing is obviously the agentic space is extremely interesting, as I mentioned. So that is kind of the Wild West. I mean, we've already seen some things where, the MCP protocol is relatively brand new. It has some security challenges, et cetera. And we've already seen things where people are accidentally disclosing information across MCP tools, not really thinking about what it's doing, because you're letting the LLM basically have access to the tool. The tool, if it has access to data, who knows what it's accessing and when, and it goes back out to the LLM, and now where's the LLM send it? Does it send it to another tool that publishes it to Slack? There's a fundamental lack of understanding and protection in those areas. So what we've been working on is governing. Initial demonstrations are around MCP tools themselves and the models and their token usage and interacting with those tools. So understanding what use cases in your organization are using which tools at what time, and also being able to, through a proxy, put in place what we call protection models that scan basically what's going through that tool and can block it. So things like I can scan for PII, I can scan for injection prompts, I can scan for whatever, so that I understand who's accessing what and when, and get a dashboard view of these are all the use cases that have used this tool and how many times, and here's the response times, and here's the things. And by the way, the LLM that use case is using this many tokens, costing us this much money. Is this use case worth it? So really starting to be able to manage full agentic solutions from a governance perspective.
Okay. And that's what the Model Ops platform does?
Well, it manages everything from an Excel spreadsheet to a machine learning model to generative AI to agentic solutions now, as well as a whole, in a consistent single pane of glass view. Because these same problems exist for if I'm just using a traditional classifier or a logistic regression, or I have an Excel spreadsheet that does forecasting for the business, and it does, like a lot of banks will use that as their methodology of proving they're solvent. You need to manage that. You need to govern it. And to us, a model is a model is a model, but we have enhanced techniques where it makes sense for the different kind of specific models. So it's not just this. This is another part of a bigger picture. We do the holistic governance of all decision-making assets like this, machine learning, generative AI, et cetera.
Excellent. So talk to us about your engineering team. How many engineers do you have? What's your work model? I'm guessing you're remote, as you're in a cabin in Colorado right now.
Yep. Yeah, we are remote first, all employees. We do have central locations in Salt Lake City and Chicago, where we do kind of have clusters, but we absolutely have people who are fully remote way off of that on that. And that came about as we were always a little bit remote, but when pandemic hit and everything went remote, we saw it as an opportunity to attract the best talent from wherever. And so that way we can bring in the talent where they sit and not only hit one talent pool. So that's an important aspect, I think, going forward, that some of the RTO misses is that you do miss, then you now just reduced your pool of available engineers massively. Whereas now I can get the best of the best, and we can offer them an environment that works for their lifestyle, and they can come and work with us on that. We set up and I've used this in multiple different companies now. We go into what we call squads. It's basically one leader engineer plus 2 to 3 more or junior engineers, not necessarily junior, but not the senior lead. And they have areas of focus. That doesn't mean that doesn't change, but in any near-term situation, they kind of become experts in a space. And you can even have, some swap between teams to help distribute that knowledge. They work on those spaces in specific and provide us and work together fairly autonomously. Much like I was talking about with agents, you want experts in an area, you want them to do their job, how they best do their job, and then report back up and just be held accountable for deliverables, on that kind of things on that. So that's kind of our approach on that. It's a small company, so we all pitch in wherever needed at whatever time. Obviously, as a support issue, everybody cross-pollinates on that, so everyone understands all areas of the projects and things like that. And right now we have about 10 what I call hands-on product engineers that are working. We're expanding on that. But we also have customer support engineers, we have sales engineers, et cetera, and that kind of things that not necessarily related for deliverables on that kind of things. Personally, in the CTO right now, I don't have any direct reports, kind of on purpose because I've been seeding that. But that's something we're looking at expanding on too, because I do a lot of prototyping work, getting things out there, floating ideas, seeing what makes sense. Because a lot of times you don't know until you build a little something. And so I work on those and then work on reviewing them with the engineers and kind of passing off what makes sense or incorporating the ideas into what they're doing, et cetera. And I do just general architecture review because I've had so much experience on that. So I kind of act as overarching architecture, or if it's a really nasty problem, I'll jump in and say I'm hands-on still. Like I'll debug a customer problem just like anybody else. I'm not above that by any means. Matter of fact, I like it because it keeps me real.
Nice. What AI assisted tools from an engineering perspective do you like?
Right now, we're a Java shop. Primarily. We do Python and we do JavaScript as well and that kind of thing. But we work in the enterprise and we integrate with things like Jira, ServiceNow, OAuth2 providers. We do a lot of integrations, which is unique about us as well. So Java gives us a good, reliable platform for that also enterprises are comfortable bringing it into house. So, we fly through every single architectural review we ever get because of that. So because of that, personally like IntelliJ. They're really good. I played with Cloud Code integration into IntelliJ and things like that. But frankly, for the kinds of things we're doing, a lot of the prototyping works great with the AI solutions. And we use the Junie integration that IntelliJ recently put out. It's cost effective. It's not the quickest, but it does tend to give very reasonable, high quality suggestions and outputs. And it is agentic. They offer two modes, a chat and an agentic, which I like because sometimes I just want it to write a regex and I don't want to manually figure it out. They're great at that. Sometimes I want an agentic approach where it's scanning all the remote things and things like that. As we've just seen, Cursor did some good things, but burns tens of millions of tokens. And I don't know if you followed the Reddit thread on Cursor lately, but they just upset everyone because they just jacked up the prices to cover the costs of what it was really doing. And sure enough, now it's unaffordable to use. So IntelliJ is it's more conservative in approach, but it's also cost effective and works well. We've also played with the Junie integration into VS Code as well as Copilot, the new stuff, the old stuff. On that, they've got a new beta out that is more agentic in nature and is better and looks promising. I'm kind of conservative when it comes to some tool choices because those can be one-way doors. They can really trap you in quick. So, you deal with something like IntelliJ or VS Code or et cetera. They're not going away tomorrow. We've already seen some churn in the industry around some of these ones that everybody loved up front. They're gone. Now we got a new one, and it looks like Cursor's not doing well. Yeah. So I tend to be a little conservative on those kinds of approaches.
Well, and Windsurf was supposed to be acquired by OpenAI, and that fell through.
Yep, that was one of the ones.
Definitely, what's great 1 week or 1 month or 1 quarter isn't necessarily rapidly as everything's changing. It's a moving target.
Yeah, and I just kind of feel like these solutions, they all use the same. Like Junie uses Cloud Code underneath the covers, or actually you can pick the model. They're all going to converge on functionality, I believe, on that kind of thing. So the major players may very well end up just owning and winning the space.
So as a CTO here halfway through 2025, what's the biggest challenges you're facing now?
Keeping up with what's going on. And just like I mentioned, trying to pick the right bets. There's so much stuff that has popped up and disappeared this year in rapid succession. So what are the likely, especially in the agentic space, what is likely to really take hold? MCP really seems to be an item that is taking hold, and that's one of the reasons we're investing in that now, because that seems like it's actually going to stick. But which agentic platform is going to win? I don't know right now, and you go all in on one and you pick the wrong one. Well, there's a whole bunch of wasted time and effort and money and things like that. So it's figuring out that balance of staying ahead of the curve from a product perspective, but not so far out over our skis that we're running down trails we have no idea where they go. So how do we pick that balance of what seems to be like a likely good bet on a horse, so to speak? And that's very, very challenging right now because there is so much hype. You have to dig in. You see the reality behind the hype, and you're like, okay, there's actually nothing there. There's so much being claimed to be agentic now that's not agentic.
Yes.
So how do you weed through all this and pick the right horses to place those bets on? And when it goes this fast, that's a challenge.
So Jim, you've been doing this a little while. You've had some great successes. What's one brutal lesson you wish you would have learned earlier in your career?
Well, as I said, I did learn it somewhat early in my career, but the biggest lesson I learned was there's the whole technical side, and that's great. But the best technical solution does not win. Like, it doesn't say it can't win, but just because you have the best technology, the perfect architecture, the greatest implementation in the world, and it checks all the boxes and hits all the buttons, that's a very small part of actually making a successful company. It's then also your messaging, your people, your sales, your interaction, and there's all technical aspects to all of those, like making the technology palatable to individuals, communicating it to a way that they will understand, et cetera, on that. So there's an awful lot more to being a CTO than just knowing the technology and picking the right solutions. Absolutely, that's your bread and butter. But if you don't manage the people and you don't and convince your own people, for instance, that this is why this is the right pick. Do you agree, not agree? Getting them all on board in the right directions. Novell went through this. It was all IPX, XNS based, and that's why Eric Schmidt came in to put in the TCP/IP, and literally everybody pushed back against it, and Novell ultimately failed because they were late to the market and adopting TCP/IP. Not to say they didn't do it, but it's like these kinds of decisions and management of not only the technology itself, but the adoption of the technology, explaining it in the industry, et cetera, will make or break a company. And you need to be involved in that as a CTO.
Jim, well, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. Man, you have been involved in a cutting edge throughout the past 3+ decades of technology. It's awesome to hear your perspective, your thoughts, how you attack solutions. Great content you gave for the show. In closing, any final advice for tech leaders you have?
Well, you got to always keep up, and you got to cut through the hype. You got to figure it out, especially in this market right now. There's one-way doors and there's two-way doors. Basically, one-way doors, you got to be really careful on. That's where you got to spend most of the time in decisions. Things like database structures or hanging yourself on one particular platform or those kinds of things. You got to be really careful and conscious of those. Two-way doors, you can run a little fast. You can play, you can run loose and cut yourself a little slack on those, realizing, okay, we made a bet there, but we can backpedal on that. So always examine, is this a one-way door, a two-way door, and react accordingly.
Great advice, Jim. Thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you liked the show, hit subscribe. If you didn't like it, well, tell your competitors about it then. They could probably use the help. Remember to fail hard, win big, and build what matters. See you next time, everybody.
That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.